but a special guest who's here to talk about a very interesting topic that really touches on a number of points of interest here, especially to the veteran community that we have in Hampton Roads. This is Matthew Buckley, who is joining us. He's the founder of the No Fallen Heroes Foundation. It's a nonprofit dedicated to helping veterans heal through psychedelic therapies. He's also a decorated Navy fighter pilot. So we want to welcome Matthew Buckley to the show. First of all, Mr. Buckley, my name is Connor. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And then can I call you Wiz?
Absolutely. I'm Matthew to my mom and my wife when I'm in trouble. I'm Wiz to everybody else.
And you're certainly not in trouble on the program here. So we'll go with Wiz. and we appreciate you joining us. Now, I'm going to give some background on what we're going to be discussing today. And then we'll kind of jump into the interview. This is, kind of the impetus for this interview is the fact that President Donald Trump has directed his administration to speed up reviews of certain psychedelic drugs, including ibogaine, which recently has been embraced by combat veterans and lawmakers despite having serious safety risks. Now, ibogaine and other psychedelics remain banned under the federal government's most restrictive category for illegal high-risk drugs, but the administration is taking steps to ease restrictions and spur research on using the drugs for medical purposes, including conditions like severe depression. So we want to make sure that we do include that disclaimer at the top of this interview, is that what we are talking about does, in the current time right now, remain an illegal drug in the federal government's most restrictive category. It's just out of responsibility to our viewers. We want to make sure that we include that, but we also want to jump into some of the research that you and your foundation have been doing, Wiz. And let's start here, I guess, is first and foremost, can we start with you? How did you become invested in the topic that we're talking about today, in psychedelic therapies?
Well, Connor, thanks for having me. Sadly, it started in pain and trauma and addiction and loss. It started in childhood for me. I was sexually abused as a child. I lost my sister Monica when she was 19 years old to a drunk driver, which just, I had a pretty tough childhood. And what do a lot of folks do when they have a tough childhood? They go in the military. I flew the F-18 Hornet for 15 years, and in 15 years of flying fighters, I lost 16 buddies. And along the way, I've lost 4 F-18 brothers to suicide. And flying fighter jets is extremely physically demanding, pulling G's, fighting the jet on the edge of consciousness. And then as a naval aviator, I've had hundreds of car crashes. Imagine sitting in your driveway and a crane lifting you up to the second story and then dropping you. That's the equivalent force of carrier landing. So beat up my body, beat up my mind, beat up my soul. I had a very short airline career. The morning of September 11th was my first and last day at work at American Airlines. And I went to Wall Street. And going from a fighter squadron where you trust the young men and women in that organization with your life, or they're not part of it for too long, to a Wall Street firm where I couldn't trust somebody to watch my wallet for 5 minutes when I went to the restroom. It was pretty tough. Drugs, alcohol, and being separate from my bride, my kids, and my God and my mission. So about 5 years ago, I said I have to do something about veteran suicide. After my 4th F-18 brother checked out, he had a beautiful bride and 5 kids. I was at a loss. I was blown away that 22 veterans were checking out every day by their own hand. That's a mass shooting. That is a mass shooting every day, not once a year. Could you imagine, God forbid, if 22 kids were being shot every day, not once a year in schools? This country would flip out. So I started a nonprofit, but how do you keep a veteran from killing themselves? I stood in front of a whiteboard and just threw ideas up there, help them write a resume, pay the rent, buy a suit. I was clueless. And then a buddy of mine said, hey, there's a group of Navy SEAL veterans and Special Forces veterans that go down to Mexico and they do psychedelic assisted therapy. And there's a really cool group going in a couple weeks. Would you want to go? And I said, man, go to Mexico and do drugs with Navy SEALs. It sounds like a great weekend. Connor, I had no idea what I was getting into, and I'll give you the cliff notes. It saved and changed my life. It wasn't fun. It wasn't recreational. I've done some challenging things in my life. This was one of the most challenging. I was down for 14 hours. I couldn't move. If you've ever seen the movie Lone Survivor or read the book with Marcus Luttrell, Navy SEAL, I went with Marcus. I went with JT, Jared Taylor from Black Rifle Coffee, another Navy SEAL veteran, and an NFL veteran player who was suffering from horrific head trauma. And Connor, this was a life-changing experience. So I got home and I said, "This is how we're going to end veteran suicide." It destroyed alcohol in my life. I appreciate the disclaimer you gave, Connor, but the 60s called, and they want most of that back. The definition of a Schedule One drug in this country is no therapeutic use and a high risk of addiction. I just defined alcohol and cigarettes, and they're 100% legal. The ibogaine that I sat with is anti-addictive. If I smelled alcohol up to a year after this treatment, it made me dry heave. I got physically sick when I smelled alcohol. And it was the most therapeutic thing I've ever done in my life. I reconnected with my sister who had passed away, with my God who I had lost contact with. So it was the most therapeutic thing in my life, and it was anti-addictive. So our government likes to label things sometimes the exact opposite of what they are. And I was in the Oval Office with the president last month, and he recognizes that. Like, man, it's absolutely ridiculous that some of these compounds that are saving and changing lives are still Schedule One. And you alluded to some of the potential issues. Ibogaine can cause some sort of arrhythmia, lengthen the beat between your heartbeat, lengthen. But we pre-screen for that. You can give a magnesium drip. Stanford did a study with a bunch of Navy SEALs on ibogaine, and they mitigated all those potential heart issues. So I think, Connor, in the history of ibogaine being used in the West, I think there's approximately 30 deaths, but just about every one of those deaths was due to underlying conditions, heroin addict or heart issues that weren't uncovered. 3,000 people die every year from aspirin. So a lot more people die every year in this country from aspirin than they do ibogaine in 30 years. So I appreciate the disclaimer, but we can mitigate a lot of those things.
Yeah. First of all, your personal journey, your personal story is unbelievable. Of course, we want to say we're so sorry for your own struggle and those that you've lost along the way. And we really appreciate the fact that you are turning all of that into a fight for something good. I want to start with the prevalence of PTSD in the veteran community, as well as depression and addiction. Why is PTSD something that is so difficult to diagnose, difficult to treat, difficult to get our arms around as a society, to the point where you had to go on this very long journey just to try and find solutions? What is it about this problem that has made it so confounding to try and solve?
It's a great question, Connor, and a couple things. We in the veteran community are asking all our fellow Americans to drop the D. It's not a disorder, it's an injury. We actually say PTSI. So there's a couple things wrapped in that, Connor. One is that there's different types of that PTS, right? You can have a traumatic brain injury. You can have moral injury. I have a couple of fellow aviator brothers and sisters who have a lot of trauma from moral injury, dropping some bombs on some people or having to do some things. So we have determined and studied and stuff like that a lot of that PTS or that trauma can be treated. And it's not to actually use the word drugs. Ibogaine, 5-MeO-DMT, psilocybin, I do not use the word drugs when it comes to them. These are medicines. Marcus Luttrell, he'll tell you, he was on 15 drugs from the VA, 5 for breakfast, 5 for lunch, 5 for dinner. He hasn't taken a single drug since that treatment 5 years ago. This was our 5-year anniversary, May 20th. 5 years ago to this day, as a matter of fact, Connor, we sat in ceremony. So these compounds that God put on this planet for us to heal, they're not made in a lab with a guy in a lab coat and a beaker focused on profit. These come, from Earth, from Mother Earth, and they can get to the root of the issue. Trauma is usually an event-driven something, right? We've helped many veterans, female and male, who have experienced MST, military sexual trauma. These are men and women who never got shot at in anger by the enemy, but you expect your enemy to shoot at you and try and hurt you. You don't expect a squadron mate. So we've helped folks with trauma who have never even seen combat, but they've suffered other things. So these compounds, these medicines, as I call them, go in and they do some heavy, deep cleaning. As the president said in the Oval Office, I think he looked at RFK or the FDA commissioner and said, "Hey, how effective are SSRIs, the stuff we're kind of using?" And they shrugged and said single digits. The Stanford ibogaine study, you can Google it. I think it was 80 to 85 of the Navy SEALs that had this treatment were clinically cured, healed. I mean, almost never do you hear the word healed or cured whenever we're talking about drugs, big pharma drugs. But when it comes to some of these compounds that we get from Mother Earth, we're using the H word, which is healed. And Connor, it's interesting because these compounds have been used for millennia. And we in the West like to act like, with our ego that we just discovered these. Hey, we just discovered ibogaine. We're late to this party. Cultures around this planet have used them successfully for a long time. So, and the president said that. He said, "Hey, I get we got to, test and look into this stuff." But he looked over his shoulder at Marcus Luttrell. We got back from Mexico, Connor, and his brother, Morgan Luttrell, also a Navy SEAL, combat veteran, looked at him and said, "Man, you look different. You look, 100 pounds lighter. What you do?" So Morgan Luttrell went and did the same thing, and his exact quote is, "I got hit by a bus driven by God." And after that, he ran for Congress, and he's currently Congressman Luttrell. He's one of our biggest supporters. But President Trump looked over his shoulder and said, "Fellas, this worked for you, right?" And they're like, "Yeah." The guy who shot bin Laden, Rob O'Neill, was in the Oval Office with us as well. All of those guys over the president's left shoulder said this saved and changed their life. And then he looked back at the folks in the lab coats in the FDA and said, "What are we doing here?" If the SSRIs are only working single digit percentages and 80 plus percent with these Navy SEALs or Special Forces veterans, what are we doing? So it was pretty incredible. It was a surreal moment. I was a part of history. Brian Hubbard, one of the ibogaine heavies behind the president, right next to Joe Rogan, said, "Mr. President, thank you for ending the war on psychedelics in this country." And it was awful. Richard Nixon started the war on drugs because the counterculture was using these compounds to love and be anti-war. And they said, "Oh, okay, well, now that's a felony. And here's your rifle. Go kill people on the other side of the planet." So it's interesting that, the hippies and all those folks in the 60s, the anti-war folks got destroyed in this, war on drugs against these compounds. And this time around, Connor, it's the veterans, the first responders, and their families who are leading the fight here.
Yeah, very much so. Listening to the passion that you have for this topic really is incredible. Something I want to make a distinction about is when you lead a conversation as we have today with sort of that label of psychedelic. I think a lot of people, their minds are immediately going to go to sort of that pop culture representation of psychedelics when it comes to recreational drug use. Now, you've already made a distinction in describing your experience, but is there anything else you'd like to say around why this is not necessarily for you the same as that, the same as what we typically would consider to be psychedelic drug use?
So Connor, a couple of things when we talk about using these compounds, you have to be very intentional. Set and setting, right? What's your mindset? And then where are you doing this? So we treat these as a combat mission. You have several briefs before you go sit in ceremony. You get a 50-page manual to read to get up to speed. You come armed with 5 intentions for the medicine, 5 questions. 5% is the actual retreat. 95%, Connor, is what you do with it when you get home. You're going to get a clean piece of paper, but if you go home to the people and the things, the activities that made you sick, you're going to be in a dogfight. So we have follow-up calls. We have integration. So we take this deadly seriously. This is not, these aren't your parents' psychedelics, so to speak. These are intentional use in a clinical setting, half clinical and half spiritual. And Connor, I've been in this space for over 5 years. It still makes my skin crawl to hear the word psychedelics. So they're actually changing some of the language around it. Neuroplastogen. I know that's a mouthful, but psychedelics is kind of a mouthful too. Mark, there was a Navy SEAL we helped years ago, and he was a breacher. At the door, just concussive explosions setting the charges. And he showed us his brain scans from the VA, and they were dark and gray and, you know, awful brain scans. 3 months after sitting with ibogaine once, his brain scans were completely clear. So the neuroplasticity of these compounds, the folks in the lab coats are still scratching their head going, we don't get how this works, but that's pretty incredible. Let me give you an example. They discovered penicillin in the 20s, I believe, and it saved the lives of millions of GIs potentially and people around the world in World War II. They didn't find out how penicillin did that until the 60s. So I think we're here with these compounds as well. I know, Dr. Deborah Mash, I know a lot of folks in Stanford who are doing this work, and they do. They kind of scratch their head. You're like, Wiz, man, we're still trying to figure out the exact how, but it is doing this. So I'm with you. The word psychedelics, gives me a little pause too, and I've seen the results of this. But the times they are a changing. It's funny because I'll talk to, when I walk the halls at Capitol Hill talking to these people, even the most law and order, anti-drug Republican, if I get them for 5 to 10 minutes and I give them the executive summary, they're in. They completely change their minds. So this is, whether it's, I saw a headline like a year or two ago. It said like AOC and Dan Crenshaw, and I didn't want to read the rest of the headline. I was like, what, they got into a fist fight? AOC and Dan Crenshaw agree on psychedelic assisted therapy for veterans. So it's extremely rare to see both sides of an aisle say, yes, we need this and we need to move forward with it. But I'm going to be honest with you, man. And I'll keep the name out of it, but I was talking to a congressman behind closed doors, and he said, Wiz, I love what you're doing. And I was like, awesome. He said, well, you're going to have a problem with the big pharma and the alcohol and tobacco folks. And I was a little stunned. I was like, isn't that your job? What do you mean I'm going to have a problem? So uh, the the swamp is thick. I know we've at No Fallen Heroes Foundation to date, we've saved hundreds. I think we might be even close to 300 at this point. Not a single suicide, not a single adverse event, not a single. I can't even. I search for the bad in the hundreds that we've helped, and I can't find anything. We have had people go home to people or things that made them sick and be in a little bit of a dogfight, but they pulled out of it. So, Connor, there's something here, and the president firing that executive order is the first step. That's the end of the beginning. There is so much work to do. Being finally recognized, it's been a tough 5 years, man. I'll be honest with you. Walking the halls of Congress, and but people are starting to realize that, as you led with, a Schedule I drug is technically alcohol and tobacco, and it's not these things. These things are not recreational. And let me be clear, these are not for everybody at all. There are so many different healing modalities: yoga, breath work, meditation, walking on the beach, climbing a mountain in Tibet. There are so many potential ways for people to heal. I like to say, or I don't like to say, but I will say, radical trauma might need radical healing. And these compounds, these sacred medicines to many cultures are definitely radical healing.
Yeah, and you talk about AOC and Dan Crenshaw and some of the legislation that has been introduced over the course of the last half decade, and even 2021, when some of this was kind of coming about, it was not looked at with much seriousness, and it has only grown
Correct.
since then in terms of its viability, as like you said, for its genuine healing capabilities here. So let's continue to
Correct.
interrogate this a little bit. You talk about it's not for everyone, and you also mention how going into these going into these processes, a combat mission, and that you come armed, and that you are very intentional. Do you have any concerns as this becomes more normalized and more, maybe perhaps more readily available, as some of these things sometimes do, that it could become a problem for people who are not prepared for that, not prepared or not in need of that intensive an experience, and how this could impact them? Is that a concern, and how do you kind of tackle that?
Great question. Let me split this up. Like I said, this is not recreational. This is not fun. You're not taking ibogaine and going out to a club. You're taking ibogaine and you're not going anywhere for a weekend. So there's about a 0% chance of anybody wanting to do what I did for fun or not needed. It is it is an incredibly challenging uh, process. The NFL player Robert Gallery, he was down. He was down for a day and a half. And I remember the doctors and our guides, we would kind of be looking upstairs like they could tell we were worried. And they were like, he's getting exactly what he needed. And they don't know you have CTE until you die and they cut your grape open. And he's like, Wiz, I know I had CTE, and he is a different human being. So there is a near zero chance that ibogaine specifically you're going to do recreationally, and it's near impossible to get. So ibogaine is a alkaloid that comes from the iboga shrub. It's root bark from Central West Africa, Gabon. So it's got about 10, 11 alkaloids in it. And then the West, we isolate one of those alkaloids called ibogaine, and you take that directly. That gives you the potential heart arrhythmia because taking the ibogaine out of iboga, it's a nuke, and that's why you can have the heart issues. You can actually sit with iboga, the actual root bark, in ceremony, and it doesn't give you those heart issues. I went to Costa Rica and did an iboga ceremony. Very long answer to your short question. Near zero chance that any of this stuff is going to be one. You can't do it recreationally. So that's the high hurdle when it comes to ibogaine. Now psilocybin, and I hate using this term magic mushrooms, but that's what the public identifies those as. Same thing. A heroic dose of psilocybin is a 4 to 6 hour extremely challenging experience. So, I've had people say, "Oh, I tried mushrooms once and it was awful." I'm like, "Let me guess. You went to a bar or a concert and it was a nightmare." "Oh, yeah, how'd you know?" Well, it's almost like these compounds are telling you not to use them in certain ways. So it actually, I like the fact that there is a little bit of a barrier or a hurdle. Most people who try these things recreationally, it doesn't turn out well for them, and that's the warning. That's not the medicine's fault. That's the person's fault. So in the veteran space and the first responder and the families we help, we go out of our way to stress all of these things. I don't know too many people, maybe in this space, in the veteran and first responders space, there's no potential threats to that. To the regular Americans, my fellow Americans who are listening to this type of brief, I hope I've made that point. These are not recreational. This is not fun. And Connor, you can be one and done. Most of the folks we've helped with ibogaine, one and done, and they're like, "Man, I never want to do that again." I think Rob O'Neill, the Osama bin Laden alleged shooter who was in the Oval Office, he's done ibogaine 3 times. It took him 3 rounds because he kept relapsing a little bit with the alcohol, I believe. But he's like, I needed 3 times, and I think that was spread out over about 3 years. So this isn't something you do every weekend or once a month, or man, it's not even once every couple of years. It's you can be one and done, and I'd say anecdotally about 90% of the vets, first responders, and family members we've helped have been one and done. And the only folks who have gone back for maybe is to do a little bit more digging. There is a little bit more trauma because once you do it, Connor, once you kind of see past the wall and you get on the other side, you're like, okay, I get it. Now I'm not that scared, or now I know how to navigate this a little bit. To use a Top Gun analogy, it's Maverick and Goose. The first time you sit with the medicine, you're kind of sitting in the back seat. And then the next time you go, you can do a little bit more flying if you even need to go again. So there's not too much risk on the recreational side of ibogaine or iboga particularly. A little bit of potential, recreational risk with mushrooms, but most of the people I've talked to that have done that have regretted it, and that's the medicine say, don't do this recreationally.
Yeah, you certainly caught me off guard when you mentioned Robert Gallery there. I want to say former number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft, one of the more promising offensive line prospects, of the 21st century here. So that
He
definitely,
was All-American, yeah,
yeah,
All-American at Iowa. He was a Hawkeye, and he just got inducted, I think, a year or two ago into the College Football Hall of Fame. Played for the Raiders, and it's interesting, Connor, because I sat in the car with him. We flew into San Diego. Why? Because if you do this in San Diego, you're a felon. If you do it an hour south at a clinic in Mexico, it'll save and change your life. So in a little convoy, I sat next to Robert. I didn't know who he was at all. I just met these guys, earlier that morning. And Connor, I was sitting next to a 6'7", 350-pound dead iceberg. He was, and he told me, 6 months, a year later, he's like, Wiz, if that didn't work, I was going back to Lake Tahoe, and that was it. I was done. He is a completely different human being. He started his own nonprofit to get ibogaine to his NFL brothers who are suffering from head trauma. It's insane. I saw him a year later at a fundraiser. I didn't even recognize him. I was walking right past him. This big guy threw me an elbow. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on here? And it was him. I didn't even see him, recognize him, because it was that much of a difference. So the fact that I went with Marcus and JT and a civilian, an NFL player with head trauma, should tell that God made all of we call it, instead of the Incredibles, the Disney movie, we called ourselves the Unusuals. Our little group we called the Unusuals. It was a perfect group because we all went out and kind of spread the word in different paths. It was pretty incredible.
yeah, it's an amazing story. I feel like I could talk to you about this for, forever here, but I want to
Yeah,
make sure, maybe we'll have you back on down the road as this continues to progress. Let's end it
absolutely.
there with the one final question of what's next. What should everyone be looking out for next as we've had this huge step from the federal government here? What's to come here in the short-term future?
So a couple of things. Let me give a shameless plug, not so shameless, too. A year ago, Connor, that I had lost my faith for decades, and it hit me last year, kind of sitting here meditating, and it came to me as a little Irish Catholic kid from South Jersey, and the body and blood of Christ type of thing. I'm like, these were sacraments. So a year ago, I started Sacred Warrior Fellowship. I protected the First Amendment and religious freedom for 15 years. Now I'm going to exercise it. So we started our own entheogenic church, and we use these compounds in sacred ceremony down here in South Florida. So you don't have to go to Mexico. We do use psilocybin as our sacrament, not ibogaine, because of all the issues we talked about, the heart issues and stuff like that. So that's what was next for me. Is trust me, I never 5 years ago, me, if you told me, hey man, you'd start a church, I would have laughed at me and taken my lunch money. But I'm a little concerned, Connor, that we jumped into the psychedelic deep end with the president, targeting ibogaine, and we did fly over ibogaine, or I'm sorry, psilocybin or 5-MeO-DMT and other compounds that don't have the heart issues or the medical stuff. So I'm happy that I was in the Oval Office behind a president who said the word ibogaine and ended the war on psychedelics, but I'm a little leery that we went full ibogaine and didn't stop at some psilocybin. There are publicly traded companies that are making these compounds. The stocks are doing incredibly well. Not that that's what I'm focused on, but we're maturing and it's happening quickly. I just want to make sure it's done with intention. And we also put the ladder down and pay it foot back to the Bwiti in Gabon and these other cultures that have been using these compounds. I'm not going to use the word cultural appropriation, but these compounds came. They didn't come from America, and we probably need to thank the folks. And we do that when we do an ibogaine retreat or psilocybin. We send money back to Gabon to nonprofits who are making the iboga plants and stuff like that to kind of to be good shepherds of these compounds. But I'm extremely happy, man. There's no way. I just realized it's May 20th, and I have a calendar reminder that says rebirth. So as soon as I get done talking to you, I'm texting Marcus and all those guys and saying happy rebirth day. And that's exactly what we call it. I was born again, Connor, and I thank God every day. I've reached the point in my life where I can tell you this. I'm grateful for my suffering because it brought me talking to you today and this incredible mission. So I appreciate it, man.
We appreciate it as well. It's been great to have you on, and it's something that you are obviously very passionate about, and the help that it could provide for others, the help that it's provided for you. So we look forward to seeing how this new investment goes in research. And again, hopefully we'll get to talk to you once more on the show here as things progress with this new initiative from the federal government. So thank you very much, Wiz Buckley. We greatly appreciate all of your time, and we'll see you down the road.
Thanks, Connor. God bless. We'll see you.
All right, so really a unique opportunity for us here on Live Impact News to have Wiz on. Again, a decorated Navy fighter pilot and the founder of the No Fallen Heroes Foundation, a nonprofit. Now, we want to make sure, once again, that we do state, as we have these discussions and as there has been a renewed investment of both resources and attention on certain psychedelic drugs, including ibogaine, which has been embraced by some in the combat veteran community. We want to make sure that we continue to state that, number one, as of the current time frame, ibogaine and other psychedelics do remain banned under the federal government's most restrictive category for illegal high-risk drugs. We want to make sure that we include that even as we explore these new initiatives. And we also want to make sure that we state here for any of our viewers, if you are thinking about taking any steps with your health, make sure that you consult your doctor or a medical professional. If there is anything that you are considering doing, once again, for your own health, make sure that you consult with a doctor or medical professional. We are exploring major stories and breaking news and various headlines and new initiatives. But before you do anything, again, speak to a doctor, speak to a medical professional who you trust before you take any steps to do things involving your own health. And that does it for, again, a very unique opportunity to talk to someone who is clearly very passionate about a topic that is gaining more notoriety here as we go forward in the United States. Okay, as we go forward here on Live Impact News, we're going to take a commercial break. When we get back, there's a live event getting ready to start up in Washington, D.C., a press conference from lawmakers, but we've had quite a bit going on today. We'll review some of that as well. We'll be right back.